many sons did Jacob have? How many tribes of Israel are there? Alright, so let's count the sons of Jacob. And so we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Those are with Leah. Alright, and then Rachel says, oh, Bilhah is all yours, Jacob. And then she had 2 kids, Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah was like, okay, Jacob, you can have Zilpah. And she had not Issachar, yeah. It was before Issachar and Zebulun. She had Asher and Gad. Yeah, Gad and Asher. And then Leah had 2 more kids, Issachar and Zebulun. And then Rachel had her 2 kids, which is Joseph and Benjamin. That equals 12. Okay, so how many tribes were there? 13, because remember the birthright, right? So was there a tribe of Joseph? No, he gets a double portion of the birthright. So you take 12 kids, you split it 12 ways. Right. For each kid, you split it 13 ways. Joseph gets double everyone else. So that is the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. So how many sons of Jacob? 12. How many tribes? 13. That doesn't sound right, does it? You know, in heaven it talks about the 12 tribes, right? The gates, and there's apostles too. But then there's all throughout like the book of James and the Bible, it talks about James, the 12 tribes scattered abroad greeting. Right? Jesus talks about the 12 tribes. You look at the New Testament, it's always 12 tribes. Never 11, never 13, always 12. And for eternity, it's 12. But we just counted 13. We know there's 13 tribes, we just named them. But all throughout the New Testament, it talks about the 12 tribes of Israel. What happened? It's not Levi. That's one of the tribes. The tribe of Levi. He didn't get land. But in a way, Simeon did not either. Because Simeon's land was taken over by Judah. The only Simeonites had to go north. 13 tribes, but all throughout the New Testament and eternity, the gates to the foundation or whatever, is 12. So, how did we get 12 tribes when there's really 13 and 12 sons? Alright, Matthew chapter 13. We already talked about the parable of the sower. And you know, I forgot to talk about the Airbnb. Sorry about that. I left you hanging. Remember I said we want to go for the Airbnb? Now, some of you know Airbnb is a website. Started out with 2 guys, and they got an air mattress, and they said, we'll make it like a B&B, a bread and breakfast. Okay? And then they started a website called Airbnb. Alright? But this is a spiritual Airbnb. Alright? Because the sower sows the seed through the air. Okay? He takes the seed, he throws it through the air, and then you get the bearing and the bringing forth. Alright, that's from Matthew 13:23. Okay? I know, I'm creative. Alright. Verse 24. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. Another parable putting forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, this is good King James English here, I love this. An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Skip down to verse number 37, where he explains this parable. So you get it, the physical part of it, right? The tares, those are the weeds, then there's the grain, that's the good seed. Okay. Verse 37, he answered and said, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. Okay, now this is different from the parable of the sower. He's not explaining the parable of the sower here. He is explaining the parable of the tares and the wheat. Alright. 37. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. Of course, Jesus Christ. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. That's kingdom of heaven. It's not just the Jews. Those are saved people. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. Okay, now in the parable of the sower, it talks about the wicked one being the bird of prey. Here we see again the wicked one. But he's not the bird of prey here. He's not eating seeds. He's sowing seeds. So you have two sowers, the wicked one and the Son of Man. You have two seeds, children of the wicked one and the children of the kingdom, the children of the Son of Man, Christians, believers. Verse 39. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of the world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Now that's talking about basically the battle of Gog and Magog and the great white throne judgment. Okay, because this is already the same people. It says he'll gather them out of his kingdom, as during the millennium, it's Christ's kingdom, and then he'll separate. There'll be a separation, okay, between those that are saved and those that are lost. And the lost ones, either they're already in hell or they're alive during the kingdom, but they never got saved. During this time, battle of Gog and Magog, then comes the great white throne judgment. At that time, Christ will do the sending forth into the furnace, the burning fiery furnace, Gehenna. All right, you could say hell. Right? Technically, it's Gehenna, the lake of fire. Right. So that's the parable. So that's what we understand. So what's the spiritual implication? What does it mean to us? And that is a lot of us, and I hope none of us here today. But what does the tare look like? What does the tare look like? Tare is the weed, right? It's called the tare. It's the weed. The mold, the grass, right? The weed. But here, what does it look like? The good plant. And it wasn't until they started to grow up that all of a sudden one of the servants is like, hey Jeff, what's going on here, Jeff? These look similar, look the same at the beginning, but no, these are two different types of seeds that were sown, and we never noticed until it germinated. It grew up for a while, and it looked like they were the same until now we see that there's a difference. In the good master of the house, he says, not yet, but there will come a time where I will cast those seeds. I will cast those plants, the child of the wicked one, I will cast them into the lake of fire. How did they look when they were very young, when they were just springing up out of the ground? They looked the same. And in our congregation here, in this room right now, and those that are listening online, if I could point and say, well, that person's saved and that person's not, could I do that just by looking at you? All look saved to me. You all look like wheat, good, strong wheat plants to me. But it could be that in here there is a tare. Or it could be that in this group here there are tares. There are people who are sitting right now or listening over online, and they're lost. And this concerns Christ. And he says, I don't want you to be a tare. I want you to think that you're saved. I don't want you to, because here's the problem. I think one of the points that Christ is getting at is we have this problem of cultural Christianity. And that is we are cultural Christians. Like, for example, I grew up with 7 siblings, and I'm a second generation Christian. And so the way that I grew up is, we had Bible time at night as a family, we learned the hymns, and of course we went to church on Sundays, we went to prayer meeting on Wednesdays, and I had nothing to do with it. That's just how I was raised. Right. And whether I was saved or not, I was going to church on Sunday. Whether I was saved or not, I talked to the men earlier, we don't swear. And there's just stuff that, and because of the way I was raised, it just became a cultural thing. I know how to behave in church. I know the lingo, the jargon that Christians use. None of those things means that I'm a Christian. One was a wheat, one was a tare. And as a parent, and to you parents who are out there, what is your number one fear beyond any other fear? It's that a child is not truly saved. Is that you will not be reunited together wholly, entirely, completely as a family. That is by far the greatest fear of any human being, of any mankind. If you can have the fear, am I lost? Well, that's not really a fear, because with that fear comes the realization of your own salvation. So the greatest fear for man is not, of course, death. It's not pain. It's not poverty. Okay? It's not public speaking, which was rated the number one fear beyond death was public speaking. It's not that. The greatest fear of mankind is that a child, a very close loved one, or a spouse, or a parent, you think that they're saved, but it turns out that they're lost. And Christ is dealing with us in this parable. I see him dealing with that issue in this parable. He's saying, look, tares. Now this really is not a parable for saved people. It's really about, the problem is not the good seed, right? They're growing, they're becoming fruitful, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And, it's not, Christ wasn't the problem who did the sowing, the wicked one, you can't fix him, the bad sower. This parable is about finding the tares. And I think cultural Christians, people of that cultural Christianity, they're not truly saved. For example, if I brought my kuya here, my brother, he knows the hymns. He can sing alto, he can sing tenor, he can sing bass. He knows a lot of hymns by memory. When we were kids, growing up, he used to close the hymn book and he'd sing every single verse by heart. All 4 verses or 5 verses of the hymn, he'd memorize them. Why? He grew up in church singing the hymns, right? And if I were to bring him here, he would know how to shake your hand. He knows how to talk. He knows, very comfortable, no problem. He goes to church, and any church he would go to, they would think maybe he's a pastor, maybe he's an evangelist or a deacon. Not even saved. Culturally, he's a great Christian. He understands how to act and interact and mingle as a Christian. But in his heart, he's lost. You wouldn't know it. But when we were young, he was a tare. He was a weed. And now what happened? As he left his parents' home, as he grew up, turned 18 and left the home, what happened? You began to see, wait a minute, all this time we thought he was saved, but he was really lost. All this time we thought that he was wheat, but he was a tare. And so, what is Jesus promising? He's saying, I'm going to take that tare when it dies at the end of during harvest time. Okay, when everyone's dead, at the end of the world, when the wheat is dead and the tare, when it's harvest time and we all die, I'm going to take that tare. I'm going to have to throw it in Gehenna, the lake of fire. And so a lot of people with this cultural Christianity, they say, well, I'm fine. Look at me. There's nothing bad happening to me. My judgment, I must be okay. Because they get this idea because of their cultural Christianity that they are going to be okay. And Jesus is giving us this parable and he's saying, no, you're not going to be okay. I'm just waiting now. I don't want to destroy you now because then I would destroy the Christians along with you. Revelation chapter 7, that's a hint. Revelation chapter 7, that's a hint. So Christ is saying, in the future, at the end of the world, that's when I will do the judging. And the reason I don't destroy you now because you are a tare is because you are mingled with the wheat. Okay, you might hear about, especially as a Catholic country, people say, I am blessed because I've done good. And then when someone does bad, like Jesus' disciples, oh, he's blind or he's lame or something bad happened to him because he lived a bad life. And there's this idea out there that in this life we receive the judgment for the things that we've done wrong. So if you live a pretty clean life, then God's going to bless us and we're going to be pretty peaceful and happy. And if we live a riotous and a bad life, then God's going to frown upon us, and we're going to have more of a life of suffering. Okay, so for example, I had a neighbor helping me put an addition on my house, and he smokes and drinks like crazy, right? And he had a problem with I think it was his throat, and not cancer, or maybe it was high blood pressure, something like that. He had a health problem that was obviously related to his lifestyle of smoking and drinking. The question is that a judgment from God? And the answer is no. To a Catholic would say, yes, it's God's judgment. No, it's not. It's the judgment upon the body for the bad decisions that he made. Because of his drinking and his smoking, physically, those are repercussions. Those are the consequences of his bad choices that he physically made upon his physical body. You get it? Yeah. What is the punishment that God gives us? That's the judgment. That's the tears. That's Gehenna. That's the lake of fire. So, when something bad happens to someone, like for example, a criminal goes to prison. Not very fun, going to prison. Is that the judgment of God upon that criminal? That's the judgment of man. So you can say, well, if you serve God with your life, you'll live a peaceful and happy life. That's not the promise. Eternity in heaven, that's where you get to enjoy your peaceful life and your happiness and your joy. But this life here on earth, if something bad happens to a drunk, like a drunk driving accident, it's because he drank alcohol. That's not God's punishment on him. That's because of his own decision, and that's just, you could say, the laws of science, or physics, or the law of man, or the consequences of your physical body. Okay, so you have a lot of cultural Christians who say, look, I grew up pure, even though they're sinful, and that's the reason why they're lost in the first place, is because of that thinking. And they say, and now I don't have a judgment upon me. Look, I'm doing okay. I must have escaped God's judgment. God must be smiling upon me because, I'm doing okay. I'm doing just as well financially, just as much happiness as my brother over here who did get saved, and I guess I'm okay. In other words, they're looking for that judgment of God now. And here Jesus is saying, your judgment is coming. Don't think that you've escaped judgment just because you have learned how to be a cultural Christian. 31, verse 31, Matthew 13. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds. But when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. When you get saved, compared to those who don't get saved, let's say you're a mustard seed, an herb seed, and there are other herb seeds like bushes, okay, or grass, weeds. Compared to a tree, what is a tree compared to a grass blade? You say, well, they're both herb plants. Well, the mustard seed's small like a grass seed. But what's going to happen to a grass seed? That's right, your neighbor's going to step on it. Just kidding. What's going to happen to your grass seed? It's going to grow about this tall. Or maybe up to this tall. It's alfalfa, different types of grass. What's a tree going? A mustard tree. It's a tree. What's a tree compared to a grass? Right? It's like no comparison. But as a seed, they look the same. They're both very tiny. And salvation is like that. Once you get saved, what will happen? You'll grow up to be a tree. And you might look like lost people around you, and then you're saved because you have cultural Christianity. But what's going to happen? When they move out of the house, they're going to look like a blade of grass. And when you're saved, you're going to grow up to be like a tree. Okay? So it's people who don't really get saved until after they find out. Once you leave the home, once you really decide for yourself what you're going to be, a blade of grass or a tree. Alright, let's look at another one real quick. Verse 33. Another parable spake he unto them. The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened. This is talking about if you really get saved, if in you is the gospel, it's like bread that has leaven in it. And then if you did not really get saved, you don't have the kingdom of heaven in you. You're not truly saved. You're going to be like bread with no leaven. Unleavened bread. How sure are you that that bread with leaven will rise? How sure are you? But I do know this, that guaranteed the leaven will rise.
Yeah.
And guaranteed with no leaven it won't.
Yes.
And Jesus is likening, he's using a simile to saying, if you're saved, you are going to rise like bread. If you are not saved, you're going to remain. You're not going to rise. So these are some parables that Jesus uses to get some spiritual truths into those people that says, because you think you might be a cultural Christian, you've got to beware. Ask yourself the question, am I really saved? If you're saved, you're going to rise like leaven rises. If you're saved, you're going to look like a mustard tree compared to blades of grass. Once you leave the home, I talk to my kids especially, once you guys leave the home, you're going to have to show yourself that you're different from the world. And if you don't show yourself as different, if you don't rise above the world that's around you, if you don't grow high and strong and tall like the world that's around you, like a tree compared to a blade of grass, you have to ask yourself, was I really ever a wheat, or have I always been a tare? This is some of the lessons that we get from Matthew chapter 13 and some of these parables. Ask yourself, am I really saved? Do I do what I do because I'm worried about the judgment of mankind? Parents, judges, lawyers, the legal system? Do I do what's right because I don't want to get cancer or alcohol poisoning or liver, cirrhosis of the liver? Or do I do what's right because like leaven rises like a tree of a mustard seed, grows beyond a blade of grass? Do I do these things because I'm saved?
Right.
Alright, let's go down to the riddle. Look at Revelation chapter 7. Look real quick at Revelation chapter
144,000.
Yeah. 12 times 12 is 104. 12 times 12,000 is 144,000. So you look at the verses 5. Okay? Alright, John D, you're an accountant, right? So you have to count for us, okay? Of the tribe of Judah. So how many tribes do we have?
12,000.
12,000 from tribe of Judah. That's one tribe. Of the tribe of Reuben,
12,000.
tribe of Gad,
12,000.
tribe of Asher,
12,000.
tribe of Naphtali,
12,000.
tribe of Manasseh,
12,000.
tribe of Simeon,
12,000.
tribe of Levi,
12,000.
tribe of Issachar,
12,000.
tribe of Zebulun,
12,000.
tribe of Joseph.
12,000.
We'll explain that in a second. And the tribe of Benjamin.
12,000.
Okay, John D, how many was that? Okay, good. 144,000. So we got 12 tribes. Dan is missing. Remember when, and
It was represented by Joseph.
there you go. So remember Joseph had Ephraim and Manasseh? Manasseh kept his name Manasseh. Ephraim changed his name to the tribe of Joseph. I don't know. But that explains why there were 13 tribes, 12 sons, 13 tribes for a while, and then it got down to 12 tribes. Dan was a bad boy. So, yeah, Dan, remember Bilhah, Leah had 4 kids, and then Rachel's like, I don't have any kids. You can have Bilhah. And that was the offspring. Dan, the man. And that was kind of a bad start. And then because of that, it was due to envy and hatred between the 2 sisters, and then Dan was born. And then Dan, of course, as Pastor mentioned, introduced them to idolatry, especially Jeroboam, the two golden calves. And then by Revelation, they got wiped out. We went from 13 down to 1. Alright, Pastor.
Amen po ba? Tumayo po tayong lahat, mga kapatid. Nakakalungkot naman pero buhay pa tayo kaya tayo malungkot. Let us pray that our kids will really be saved. That's my dream, my prayer. It's a heartbreak an eternal heartbreak, I believe, when your child will not to see Jesus.